This meeting is being recorded.
All right, hey, welcome back to Principles of Accounting 2. I am still your host, Dr. B. Happy to be with all of you toward this last week of September. If you can believe it or not, we're in our 6th week already. The time goes by so fast, doesn't it? I know I say that all the time, but it really does go by quick. So here we are in chapter 21. Cost behavior and cost volume profit analysis, which is a fancy word of saying break even. I'm going to talk to you about concepts of break even and generating a profit and all the important stuff of analyzing the business from the inside based off of cost and how to generate profit, right? That's what this chapter is all about. Before we jump into that, though, I want to call your attention to the classroom. Let's talk about where we are today and where we're headed. So, in the classroom, we're here in week 6 already. Time's flying by. What do we got going on this week? We're going to talk about cost, volume, profit, but we also have another LinkedIn Learning certificate is at our doorstep for this week, okay? So here's what we got going on for this week. We got another LinkedIn Learning certificate. You know what to do, because I know you know what to do because you did the last ones. But just in case you forgot how to do these LinkedIn Learning certificates, it's very straightforward. You come into the classroom, go to the Engage and Explore folder for week 6. You select the Accounting Foundation's Managerial Accounting certificate, okay? It opens up like this. There are a total of 8 chapters to this series of videos. There's your 2 favorite guys again. It goes a ways through, okay? So just as before, it gets kind of long. I think that this one will probably take you about 2 hours to get through, thereabouts. It would be my expectation. But you'll notice what you want to have happen is that you'll go through the series of videos starting with the top. Just let it run. Okay, it'll go to the next one, and so on and so forth. As the video completes, it'll show up with a green check mark next to it, right, that says you watched it. You just let it run, okay, all the way down, all the way to the conclusion. And then at the end, when these 2 guys are done talking, it'll say congratulations, it'll say your name, and then if it doesn't pop up with your certificate, all you got to do is just come on down here to the one that says certificates and click show all, and then you'll see your LinkedIn Learning certificate. You click on that one, and then you'll click on this download PDF. It'll download to your system, and then you'll come back into the classroom and you'll upload it right here where it says Accounting Foundation's Managerial Accounting Certificate. You'll upload it here, okay? Questions on that? That makes sense to you, all right? You know what to do. You've done this before. So just go through that. I want you to start early on this one because, again, it takes like 2 hours. So you might want to consider doing it during your class time on Thursday. But please make sure you get this one done. Really important. You know it's worth 100 points. Okay? That's a lot. It's like a full letter grade, so don't miss it, right? Okay, that's the learning certificate for this week. And in addition to that, we have the quiz for chapter 21. Now, let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's jump in to chapter 21, cost, behavior, and cost, volume, profit analysis. Man, it's a mouthful. Way to think about this is a fancy word called break even. Break even. Okay? Break even means we didn't make a profit and we didn't make a loss. We broke even. All of my revenue covered all of my expenses. We broke even. That's what that means. I'm going to show you how to break even. I'm also going to show you how to make a profit and a little bit of statistical stuff. So that's what we're going to show you today, all right? So let's jump into this thing called profit, cost, volume, profit analysis, break even. There's a couple ways to think about how to break even. And when I think about how to break even, it's really one of two things. Either I got to sell enough units of inventory to cover all my costs, or I got to know how much in terms of sales dollars I need to make to cover all my costs. That's really it. We got to break even. So, here are the types of questions you might ask yourself. And how do I break even? How many units do I have to sell to break even, cover all my costs? What sales volume do I need to earn a target income? Target income, here's what this means. A target income means that I want to generate enough sales to earn a particular profit. To earn a particular profit or to earn a particular income. Okay? So, what this means is I need to sell X number of units in order to generate an income of $100,000. What is that X number of units? We don't know. We got to figure out how many units I need to sell to make an income of $100,000. That's target income. It's how much do I want to make? Right? Other questions you might ask yourself. How much will income change if we buy a new machine and reduce labor costs? When you think about costs in business, we try to think about how do we reduce our costs and increase our revenue. You reduce your costs, you increase your revenue, that means you're going to get more profit, hopefully. Right? That's why we're in business, is to make profit. If I get a new machine, how much will my labor costs reduce by? What's the change in income if my sales price goes down and my volume increases? This is a fancy one, this question. This fourth question, real fancy. To put it in real simple terms, it means what happens if I put my product on sale? What happens if I put it on sale? Okay, I normally sell it for $100. If I put it on sale for $80, what's going to happen to my profit? I don't know. It might go down. It might go up. Why would it go up? If it's on sale, more people might be interested in buying it. You see? And the last question here is how will income change if we change the sales mix of our products or services? The word sales mix. Sales mix, as you probably already know, I think we talked about it, is the number of different products that the company sells. If you sell a lot of different products, that's a sales mix, right? If that changes, how will our sales change? That's what that question tells us. So these are just some simple questions that you might ask yourself in business in order to understand, how to break even. In order to break even, one of the things we need to look at are our costs. As you know, we've been talking about costs for the past 6 weeks in this course. We talked about raw materials, direct labor, factory overhead until I was blue in the face, right? We talked about these things. We talked about the costs raw materials, direct labor, factory overhead. We know that these costs go into making a product. We know that. We talked about that. We also know that there are other costs. There's period costs and product costs and prime costs and these types of things. And we also know that we have fixed and variable costs. Fixed costs are costs that do not change regardless of the level of output. Can you give me an example? Anyone on the call? Can you give me an example of a fixed cost? Leland.
Oh, I was going to say rent.
Yes, rent. Awesome example. Yes. Rent does not change regardless of how many units we're making. I can make 100,000 units or 5 units. The rent still the same. Still got to pay it every month. Good. Very good. What else is fixed cost? What do you think?
I don't know what I'm thinking.
A car note?
A car note?
Yeah,
Car
that's
note.
good.
Yep. Car note don't change. I still got to pay for the truck that I'm delivering my product with, regardless of how many units I make. Insurance, yeah, that stays the same too, right? Doesn't matter how many I'm making, insurance still stays the same. Yep, very good. So we got car note, car insurance, rent. Another one I'll throw in there is the supervisor's salary, the salary of the manager. Okay, manager's salary don't change. Manager going to get paid the same regardless of whether we make 5 or 500. Okay, that's a fixed cost. Very well done. They don't change regardless of the level of output. Leland, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Professor, I was just going to ask a question. I thought I remember, maybe it was one of the videos, the little QuickBook Learning or something, but I remember sales mix. Is that something to do with when companies use strategies like you order burgers and then they offer to size up your combo or something for like $1 extra? They're using sales mix strategy.
Yes, that's 100% right.
Okay.
And I think that the example that the textbook gave in that chapter was haircuts. So if you go to like the barber shop, okay, or the hair salon, the stylist, I think they still call them stylists, right? The stylist or the barber will offer you different levels of cut. You see, they might give you the basic cut. The basic cut is just a simple, snip, or they might give you the deluxe, and that they'll clean the hair before they cut the hair, and then the highest level, whatever we'll say, deluxe, is to give you the shampoo, the cut, the massage, and the sculpt, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's different, as you said, Leland. It's kind of it's the same exact concept. I got different levels, okay, of the product offerings, the service offerings. Yeah. Like you said, you go to the fast food place, they might say, oh, the small, the medium, the large. You want to make that value meal. Oh, you want to, add on whatever for $1 or whatever, Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a sales mix. Yep.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So the fixed costs are costs that do not change regardless of the level of output. Examples would be rent, the manager's salary, the car note, the insurance, things that do not change regardless of how many units I make. Those are fixed costs. Very well done. Then we have this concept called variable costs. These do change with the level of output. Now, oftentimes the variable costs relate to the cost of making the product. The product itself is a variable cost. I got direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead. altogether, they make the total cost of making a product, right? And the more products I make, the higher my total cost is going to be. So the more I make of the product, the higher the cost. So an example of variable cost would be the product itself. Yeah. So like, for example, if the cost of my materials changes or the cost of my labor changes or my factory overhead changes, it's going to change my cost, my total cost. We call these variable costs. These are costs that do change the level of output. Now here we can look at it graphically. We can see the relationship between fixed and variable costs. Again, fixed costs are costs that do not change regardless of the level of output. Example would be supervisor's or manager's salary, or rent, or the car loan, or the insurance. Okay, this stays the same. That's represented here by this lovely, we'll call this red or dark orange. I don't know. I'm slightly colorblind, so we'll say this is red, I guess. This one here, the flat line here, says fixed cost 32,000. That's my fixed costs for this month. Okay, for the month, my total fixed costs are $32,000. That includes my rent, my insurance, my car loan, whatever, fixed cost, manager's salary. Total cost for the month, $32,000. Then we have our variable costs. The variable cost is the unit cost. Okay? It takes $20 to make 1 unit of product in this example. And the more units I make, the higher my variable cost is going to be. That makes sense, right? So I got my fixed cost, $32,000, my variable cost, $20 per unit. My total costs equal my fixed cost plus my variable cost. So total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost. That's represented by this green line here. Okay? On the green line, my total costs start at the amount of my fixed cost, $32,000. Why? Because again, if I make 0 products for the month, I still have to pay my fixed costs. Fixed costs are paid regardless of the level of output. So at 0 units, my total costs are $32,000. As I make more units, it rises. My total cost rises at the same rate of my variable cost. So that's what that top chart shows us. Yep. So total costs are fixed cost plus variable cost. Now, at the bottom, here we see a total cost on a per unit basis. On a per unit basis. At the top, it's total cost. At the bottom chart shows us per unit cost. All right? Now, as we mentioned, the variable cost per unit is $20. So regardless of the number of units, the variable cost per unit is $20. So on a per unit basis, the variable costs remain the same. What you see here with relationship to fixed costs on a per unit basis is that the fixed cost per unit decreases with the more units produced. So the more units we make, the lower my fixed cost per unit is going to be. Now, how do we find this? You might be wondering. We take the total fixed cost, in this example, 32,000, and we divide by the number of units, right? And that's how we get that per unit fixed costs to come down with the more units we make. And we know that the total cost per unit is variable cost per unit plus fixed cost per unit to get the total cost per unit. So that's the relationship between fixed and variable costs. One of the last type of primary costs, we'll say, is this one called a mixed cost. Just as the name implies, the mixed cost contains both fixed and variable cost components. Fixed and variable cost components together is called a mixed cost. Here's an example of a mixed cost, because I'm sure you probably haven't heard this term before. The example I like to give is, I'm going to give a real life example, okay? Don't get mad. Don't get mad. Although I was pretty mad when I heard this number too. All right. Here's my real life example. Oh, UDC. Sometimes UDC makes decisions that I just scratch my head and I gotta wonder, why would you do that? Copier machines. Oh, I hate copier machines. They always jam. There's always a line that goes through the copy. I just don't like copier machines. Okay, they're very archaic, right? And I just don't like it. All right. UDC apparently loves copier machines, and we have a lot of them, probably more than we need. So a long time ago, when copier machines were heavily used, UDC made a decision. I'll let you decide if it's good or bad. To lease a bunch of Xerox copiers, okay? And these aren't the small kinds that sit on your desk. These are the big industrial copier machines, right? You know, the ones that can print off 1,000 pages in about a minute, right? The real big ones. So UDC many years ago made a decision to lease a bunch of copier machines from Xerox. This is an example of a mixed cost. Why? The lease agreement said that you will pay us monthly the base amount of the copier machine cost, plus once you go over 10,000 pages, we will charge you 1 cent per page. So think about that for a second. The base cost is the fixed cost. So if the base cost is, we'll say, $10,000 a month per machine, which is about what it was. Base cost, $10,000 per month per machine, plus 1 penny once you print more than 10,000 pages per machine. That is an example of a mixed cost. The fixed amount is the 10,000, the base. The variable cost is the 1 cent per page over 10,000. That's what makes it a mixed cost. Leland, I saw your hand briefly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just going to ask a question, but you explained it really well. I understand it now. So it starts off as a fixed cost, and if you exceed or if you go over a certain amount, then it will become. So that's why it's mixed.
You
I
got
get
it. Exactly right. Yep. So that's mixed cost. And that's my real life example. That example still hurts me today, and that's why I still talk about it. It's a lot of money. The next one I want to talk about is called a stepwise cost. Now, this one you've probably seen before and maybe didn't realize what it was. I want you to think about your cell phone. Okay, I would be hard pressed to find that anyone in this class didn't have a cell phone. If you don't have a cell phone, you are a very rare person. Okay, but the majority of people have a cell phone, and with their cell phone, they have a cell phone plan. Okay, you can see where I'm going with this. The stepwise cost, just as the name implies, steps up as usage continues. In this example, we see that the cost is 10,000. Once we hit 1,800, it goes up to 20,000. Once we hit 3,600, it goes up to 30,000. It goes up in steps, just like your cell phone plan does. So for somebody like me, I don't like to spend a whole lot of money on my cell phone. You know what I'm saying? I don't use a whole lot of data because I'm usually on Wi-Fi. So I have like a 3 gigabyte plan. All right. And so let's say for hypotheticals, my 3 gigabyte plan through AT&T is $50 a month. All right. AT&T says, once Dr. B uses the 3 gigabytes on his plan, there's an increased charge of $10 for the next 1 gigabyte. Once I use that, there's another increase of another $10 for another gigabyte, and so on. That's an example of a stepwise cost. See, real life example. That's stepwise. So,
Professor, I'm sorry, I'm
Leland.
asking a lot of questions today. What would you consider electricity bill? Is that like a variable cost, or is that a
that's
is that a
mixed.
mixed? Or okay, I would say okay, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
that makes
utilities
sense.
is mixed because the reason for great question, Leland. So, for example, let's say your Pepco bill. You look at your Pepco bill, you're going to see a couple things on it. One, it's going to say connection fee or whatever the hell it's called. The other one's going to say service fee, and then it'll say usage. The connection fee and the service fee, those are fixed costs. And it's like, I don't know, $30 a month or whatever it is. And then the usage is based off the kilowatt hours,
Did you
and
say?
then of course that varies as well too. But
Okay,
yeah, it would be a mixed cost. Good question.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, Leland, because here we see fixed costs, variable costs, mixed costs, and stepwise costs, and the type of examples associated with them. Some of those we already talked about. Fixed costs would include things like rent, taxes, insurance, office salaries, depreciation, loans. Variable costs include things like direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead, packing, shipping, indirect materials. Mixed costs include things like, oh, this one's good, a sales representative salary plus commission. Utilities like natural gas, electricity, and water. And sometimes maintenance. Maintenance, here's an example of this. This happened to me in real life, and I was really pissed about it, but hot water tank decides to give out. What do? You call a plumber. You call the plumber. Plumber says, it'll be $150 for me to come out, plus whatever repairs need to be made.
Yeah, you gotta pay him just to walk in the door.
You know it.
Oh
That's
man,
exactly right, Leland.
yeah,
Anytime you pick up that
terrible.
phone, you make that call, they charging you.
And then they come in if they don't know how to fix it. It's like, oh, just $150 just to walk in and tell me you don't know what to do.
That's
Thanks.
right. Exactly. Yep, been there, done that. So that's mixed cost. And then we got stepwise costs. The examples of this would be a drop or add or drop of shift of workers, production line, warehouse, sales region, the cell phone plan I gave the example of, the other things like that, stepwise. Okay, so now that we know about fixed costs, variable costs, mixed costs, and stepwise costs, in business, we run a lot of statistics. because with statistics, we can make better decisions, right, about our costs, and we can look at them differently. So we use a couple of statistical models in order to show us the data in a meaningful way. And so we take all those costs and we look at things like a scatter diagram, the high-low method, and the regression analysis method. Regression analysis, that one's scary. Don't worry, we're not going to do that one in this class. I'm just going to tell you about it. So those are the three types of methods we roll through: scatter diagram, high-low method, regression analysis. These are all statistical methods and models to help to show us financial data using costs and number of units in a meaningful way. Right? So here we have a bunch of data. I got a whole year's worth of manufacturing data for this company. I got number of units produced and the total cost. Remember, total cost is fixed plus variable cost. All right? So we can see this data here. Number of units, the month, units produced, total cost. So try to remember this data, or at least look at it. All right? Just think about it. Now we got January through December. All right? First, let me go through the scatter diagram. Then I'll go through high-low method, and then I'll talk about regression briefly, regression analysis. First, the scatter diagram. This is the easiest one, okay? A scatter diagram is very simple. All it represents is the points on a chart, which represents the cost for each month. So each little of those little green dots you see represents a month. So here we have, for example, March, which is 25,000 units. I'm sorry, March is 25,000 units produced and a total cost of 25,000. So there's March. Each month is plotted out, and then we run a line through the center. The line represents the estimated line of cost behavior. It's basically the best, what we call the best fit line. It's in between all of the dots, all of this on the scatter diagram. Okay, very simple. It's just a graphical representation of the cost, and then we get the average cost using the estimated line of cost behavior. So how can you create something like this? Excel. Excel is a nice, easy way to do it. The next method is called the high-low method. Just as the name implies, we look at the highest points and the lowest points of the data. So, for example, I look down the list and I've looked for the month that I produced the highest number of units and the highest total cost. And then I also look at this and try to find the lowest number of units and the lowest total cost. Of course, they're going to be correlated. So what do you think? For those of you on the call, looking at this piece of information, this data here, can you tell me which month is the highest total cost? It's not a trick question. Just look at the month and the total cost line. Tell me which is the highest.
Total cost is the highest is November.
November, yes, 31,000. 31,000 highest total cost out of the entire chart. And in that highest month, we produced 67,500 units, which is also the highest. So our high is November, 67,500 units, total cost 31,000. Which one's the lowest? Which month represents the lowest?
June?
June, correct.
Yeah.
June total cost 18,500. Total units produced in the month of June, 17,500. Very well done. So our high is November, our low is June. Let's remember this. So now I take that information, my high November, my low June, and using the high-low method, I take the highest amount and subtract it from the lowest amount to find the variable cost per unit. So in this example, my highest amount is June, 31,000, November. Highest amount, November, 31,000. Lowest amount, June, 18,500. That gives me 12,500 on the top line. On the bottom, we take the volume, highest minus lowest. Highest volume, number of units produced, 67,500, minus the lowest produced, 17,500. That gives me a difference of 50,000. So I take my total cost difference, 12,500, divided by the difference in units produced, 50,000, gives me 25 cents per unit of variable cost. Now, I need to find my total cost from this data. How do I do that? I know what my variable cost is per unit. It's 25 cents. And I know a couple of other pieces of information. My total highest cost was 31,000 here on the left side. Total highest cost was 31,000 on the left side. To find the fixed cost, I need to do a little mathematics. I know what my variable cost is per unit. It's 25 cents. I don't know what my fixed cost is. That's what I'm trying to solve for. So I'm solving for X. On the left side of the equal sign, I got 31,000 equals fixed cost, which is X, plus my 25 cents per unit times the number of units produced at the high level. In this case, 67,500. 67,500 times my 25 cents per unit gives me 16,875 total variable cost. Now, how do we solve for the fixed cost? I know what my total cost is, and I know what my variable cost is, but I don't know fixed. It's as simple as taking it to the other side of the equation. So I take my 31,000 and I subtract out my variable cost of 16,875 to find my total fixed cost, which in this example is 14,125. I do that for both the high and the low. On the low side, 18,500 was the low total cost. To find fixed, I take my variable cost per unit times number of units produced at the low amount to get a total variable cost of 4,375. I take my 18,500 minus 4,375 to find the low total cost of 14,125. So surprising that the two balance, right? They equal 14,125 equals 14,125. That tells me that I did it correct.
Professor?
Yes,
I was
please.
just going to ask, would that be true for all of them? If you compared, would that always be, will the fixed cost always be 14,125? Or not?
Only for the high-low. So
okay, that's why it's the high-low method. Of course, I'm just
that's why we call it
overthinking it.
high-low.
My bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness.
But to your point, Leland, if you accidentally selected a different month other than the high or the low, you selected one of the months is incorrect, you selected the wrong one by accident, then those two are not going to balance. And that means that
you did something wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you did something wrong.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So my 14,125 is my fixed cost plus 25 cents per unit produced equals my total cost in this example. So that's the high-low method. Last method I want to tell you about is called regression analysis, which I am not going to force you to do because it is too damn difficult. Okay? I mean, it's easy if we're doing this course in Excel, but it's too damn difficult to do. So I'm not going to have you go through regression analysis in an accounting course. I'll let you save that for your statistics course if you haven't taken that already, because trust me, they will have you do regression analysis if you haven't done it already. Right? So regression, it's covered in statistics, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. In regression analysis for accounting, we typically use what we call least squares regression, otherwise known as simply regression analysis. It's a statistical method for identifying cost behavior. In Excel, there's a function for this. For fixed cost, it's equals intercept, and variable cost, it's equals slope. And you can calculate it in Excel if you really wanted to. I mean, I don't know if you're crazy enough to do that, but it's there for you if you want to. So I'll leave that to you, but regression analysis is not something I enjoy doing, nor do I don't think anyone enjoys doing regression analysis, which is the other point that I'm going to make is you can have artificial intelligence do your regression analysis for you, and it'll do a beautiful job, I promise. So that's regression analysis. So, if we were to compare the high-low method to regression analysis, we can see that there's going to be a difference because they're two different methods. We're calculating pretty much the same thing, but we're going to get two different outcomes. The high-low method is going to produce a fixed cost of $14,125. Regression analysis will produce a fixed cost of $16,688 using the same data. The variable cost, of course, is also going to be different, 25 cents high-low method and 20 cents using regression analysis. Which one is more accurate? It's up to you. I would say that whichever one produces the lowest cost is going to be more accurate. But regression analysis is probably most accurate. Yeah. Don't go too crazy with it. Okay, now that we know about all of those really cool things, especially regression analysis, let's talk about contribution margin. In business, it's so important that you not only cover all of your operating costs, but also try to make a profit. I mean, that's why you go into business in the first place, right? We call that contribution margin, is how we find how much profit we're going to make off of each sales dollar. So to find contribution margin per unit, we take the sales price minus the variable cost per unit. We also want to find this thing called the contribution margin ratio. And to do that, which is the percent of each sales dollar remaining after deducting the variable cost. To find that, we take the contribution margin per unit divided by the sales price per unit. Or you take contribution margin that you got from the first step divided by sales. So here we have some data at the bottom. We have a sales price of $100 and a variable cost of $70. Sales price minus variable cost equals contribution margin per unit. And this example is $30. To find the contribution margin ratio, we take the contribution margin per unit divided by the sales price to find 30% in this example. I'm going to explain why the reason why contribution margin is so important is, of course, we want to figure out how much profit we expect to generate from each dollar of sales. Yep, that's the overall importance behind it. Every business needs to know their contribution margin. Let me tell you. Every business also needs to know how to break even. What's the point of breaking even? So the point of breaking even is that we're covering all of our expenses. We're also not making a profit and we're not making a loss. We're breaking even. It's the point at which I've made enough sales in terms of unit or dollars. Okay, I sold enough units or I made enough sales and sales dollars to break even. So we look at break even in three different ways. The first, of course, is the break even formula. It's a very simple formula. The second method we use to break even, to find the break even point, is through the contribution margin income statement. We take the contribution margin that I just showed you, we apply that to the income statement. And the third method to find the break-even point is called the cost volume profit chart. Just as the name implies, we look at it on a chart. So first, let me show you the formula. This is the break-even formula. Very straightforward, okay? We take the fixed cost, total fixed cost, divided by contribution margin per unit. That gives me how many units I need to sell in order to break even. In order to find that same information in the number of sales dollars, I take the total fixed cost amount divided by the contribution margin ratio to find how many dollars I need to sell to break even. Leland, I saw your hand.
Oh, Professor, is that just like how much units you need to sell or money you need to make in order just so you're not in the red, basically?
Correct.
Okay, so if you know how much you need to sell, then you know, okay, this is where we need to at least be at this point.
You got it. That's 100%
Got it.
right. So that's why I mentioned you're not making a profit and you're not making a loss. You're breaking even. A loss will obviously put you in the red. So we don't want to be in the red, right? We want to make sure that we're in the black. And the way to be in the black is to make sure that we sell enough units or we make enough sales dollars to break even. We want a profit of zero. When we reach a profit of our income is when our income is zero, that means we broke even. We made enough sales to cover all of our expenses. Broke even. Our net income is zero. Great question. So now that we know the formula to break even, we can look at the point of break even from the contribution margin income statement method. And the way we do that is we take our sales minus our variable cost to find our contribution margin. As long as the contribution margin is equal to the total fixed costs, we've broken even. So the way we find the point of break even is we take sales minus variable costs equals contribution margin, minus fixed costs equals net income. Once your net income is zero, you've broken even. You found the point of break even. So sales minus variable costs equals contribution margin. In this case, sales, we sell at $100 a piece. We sold 800 units. That's $80,000. Minus variable costs. Variable cost is $70 a unit. 100 minus 70 is 30. Okay, $30 a unit times the 800 gives me a contribution margin of 24,000. My contribution margin is the same as my total fixed costs. Contribution margin minus fixed costs is zero. That means I need to sell $80,000 worth of units in order to break even. That's what it tells me. And then the third method to finding the point of break even is through the chart. Now, just as the name implies, cost volume profit chart, I'm looking at the point where my sales dollars and number of units I need to sell equal the point of break even. Where's the point of break even? It's at the point of equilibrium. The point of equilibrium in this case is where your total sales equal your total costs. The amount that I sold equals the amount of my total costs. I broke even. I didn't make a profit and I didn't make a loss. I broke even. So that's how we find it graphically. It's also important to understand what happens when we change the sale price. That means that my break-even point also changes, right? Of course it does. I used to sell it at $100. Now I sell it at $96. My variable costs used to be $70. Now they're $72. What does that mean? Well, it means the break-even point changes. So I know that my normal selling price is $100. My normal variable cost is $70. My normal contribution margin is $30. 100 sale price minus variable cost equals contribution margin per unit. My fixed costs are $24,000. That means I need to sell 800 units to break even. What if that changes? What if my sales price goes down to 96? I put it on sale. What if my variable cost went up by $2? That means my contribution margin, sales minus variable cost, equals contribution margin per unit of 24 in this case. Let's say my total fixed cost rose because we purchased another vehicle. We purchased, or we got a new manager, whatever. Right? Cost went up a little bit. That changes my break-even point. Total fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit equals break-even in units. So we can see that when there's a change in either the sale price, variable cost, or fixed cost, we know that we have to change our point of break-even. So this is something that we continuously update as our costs continuously change. Oops, I'm sorry. So, based off of that, I want to talk to you about a couple of other things. Since you have a pretty basic understanding of cost, volume, profit, from the perspective of break even, I want to talk about this next concept called the margin of safety. Just as the name implies, we're looking for a margin that we feel safe with, feel comfortable with, the margin of safety. While companies want to do better than break even, we want to go past break even. A margin of safety is the expected sales minus the break-even sales. Expected sales minus break-even sales gives us the margin of safety. We oftentimes express this margin of safety as a percentage. And the way we do that is we take expected sales minus the break-even in sales to then find our margin of safety. To answer your question, Leland, yes, this is a step above the break-even point. The way to think about this is, if I just break even, I'm not comfortable with that. Okay? Because I didn't make a profit and I didn't make a loss. I'm still not comfortable just breaking even. In business, I need to do better than break even. I need to go above break even. And a point that I feel comfortable with, we call that the margin of safety. I feel safe doing just above break even. You know? That's what margin of safety means. Great question. Okay, so that's margin of safety. Not too many questions on that. There might be one, I think, on your quiz. Another thing we can do is to figure out how much income we expect to make, right? We call this target income. Target income. I can figure out how much income I expect to make, because I know what my break even is. If I go beyond break even, I sell more than break even, then I know how much income I expect to make. Pretty straightforward. Sales minus variable costs equals contribution margin minus fixed costs equals net income. Once you know what your break-even point is. As long as you sell above break-even, whatever that difference is going to be your net income. Pretty straightforward. In business, and I use this a lot when it comes to pricing, I like to create what's called a target income. Target income is simply, I want to make this much money in income for the year, for the month, whatever. How do I do that? I got to figure out how many sales dollars I need to make in order to generate that amount of target income. So the way I calculate that is I take my fixed cost plus the amount I want to make, my target income, fixed cost plus the target income divided by the contribution margin ratio will give me my target income. Basically, I'm just baking it in. I'm baking in the target income. So fixed costs, fixed cost plus the target income divided by contribution margin ratio gives me my target income. Yeah, very straightforward. So in this example, my target income is $12,000. I want to make $12,000 at the end of the month. Well, how much do I need to sell in order to get there? My fixed cost is $24,000. I want to make $12,000. So fixed costs, that should actually be plus, I'm pretty sure, divided by the 30% equals $120,000. And we can do the same thing in terms of units. Fixed cost plus the target income divided by the contribution margin per unit gives me the number of units I need to sell. And we can also look at this from an income statement perspective. I can build it into my target income at the very bottom, and I can work backward. If I work backward up the income statement, they'll tell me how many units I need to sell. My target income, I want to be able to generate $12,000. I know that my fixed costs are $24,000. $24,000 plus the 12 tells me that my contribution margin should be $36,000. If I know that my contribution margin is $36,000, that tells me how much I should be selling. Sales minus variable costs equals contribution margin. So it's just a matter of working backward. A couple of other business strategies that we use include revision of break-even points in terms of dollars and revisions in terms of margin and safety. Every time that there's a change in something like variable cost, fixed cost, we need to make...
Oh, the break-even point changes.
Exactly
Okay.
Right. Yeah, so based on those changes, we simply put in the revised amounts into the equation to find the revised break-even points. Yeah, exactly right. And we do that same thing for the margin of safety as well.
Professor, just so I can understand. So it's like, for example, if the variable cost of a business goes down, then that means the break-even point goes down, which means you have an opportunity to make more money than you would have in the past.
Correct. And what that means, Leland, is that I could sell less
and still make a profit.
Still hit break even, yeah.
Or break even.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, sometimes it does go down. Yeah. Okay. So we also can calculate break-even points for a company that sells a lot of different products through the sales mix. The sales mix, as we discussed earlier on, is when a company offers a variety of the product. Okay, so the example I believe that the textbook gave was about haircuts. So you got the basic cut, the deluxe cut, the super cut, or whatever it's called, different types of haircuts. Okay, those different types of haircuts we included in what we call the sales mix for the company. And we can find the break-even point based off of that sales mix. So here we have another example. We got a company that sells both footballs and basketballs, okay? They sell footballs at we'll just pretend it's Wilson. It's probably Wilson. I mean, that's who would charge this much, right? So Wilson, they make footballs and basketballs. They charge $100 per football and $120 per basketball. Those are the sales prices. The variable cost per unit on a football is $70. The variable cost on a basketball is $85. That gives us a contribution margin per unit of 30 and 35 respectively. This tells us that our sales mix percentage is 60% and 40% respectively. How do we know that is the question. We know that because the company sells 60% footballs and 40% basketballs. To find the weighted average contribution margin per unit, we take the contribution margin per unit for each product and we multiply that by the sales mix percentage for each product. In other words, we're finding the average. So we're adding them together, multiplying by 2, divided by 2, essentially. So we take the $30 times the 60% plus the $35 times 40% to give us $32 per unit. $32 per unit is the weighted average. We apply the weighted average across all products in the company. So my contribution margin per unit for all products in the company is $32. To find the break-even point in units, we take our total fixed cost, in this example, $48,000, divided by the weighted average contribution margin per unit, 32, means I need to sell a mix of 1,500 units. A mix of 1,500 units. That could be a mix of both footballs and basketballs. It don't matter. I just got to sell 1,500 units. So in order to find the contribution margin for each product, I would take that 1,500 units times the respective percentage sales mix. For footballs, it's 60%. Basketballs is 40%. 1,500 times the 60%, I need to sell 900 units of footballs. 1,500 units times the 40% of basketballs, I need to sell 600 units of basketballs. Add them together, that's 1,500 units. Looking across, I got my contribution margin. 900 times the 30 is 27,000. 600 times the 35 is 21,000. Giving me a total contribution margin of 48,000. Well, we broke even. How do you know? The fixed cost is equal to the contribution margin. We broke even. See how we got there? So, a couple of assumptions when it comes to looking at break even. We look at cost as being classified as either variable or fixed. Costs are relatively linear, and the number of units produced are also sold. And the sales mix is constant. These are assumptions. With these assumptions, we can calculate break even in a pretty easy way. We know that it's not necessarily always the case, but that's why we make them as assumptions. Keeps things simple for us as we're calculating it. And then as this sales change, because we know that sales go up and down on a monthly basis, we oftentimes calculate what we call a degree of operating leverage. The degree of operating leverage is a measure of the effects of the change in levels of sales. I'm trying to understand the impact on our income. So I'll calculate what's called the degree of operating leverage. And to do that, we take the contribution margin and we divide by income. That gives me the degree of operating leverage. Through an example, our degree of operating leverage is contribution margin divided by income. Contribution margin in this example is $36,000 divided by our income of $12,000. Gives me a degree of operating leverage of 3. In order to express that as a percentage, we take the degree of operating leverage of 3 times the change in sales, which is 10%, to find 30% degree of operating leverage. Easy way to do that is through your favorite software called Excel. Okay. It's one of those statistical complications, right? Well, we can look at it through Excel, yeah. We'd also calculate and compute under both absorption and variable costing, which I think we talked very briefly about in a previous chapter, but just to kind of remind you of what absorption and variable costing are, is we're looking at ways where we can, as the name implies, absorb the cost collectively. So, contribution margin is either on an income statement or a variable cost income statement. Variable costs are costs that change with the level of output. You know that. Variable costs include things like direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. These are the costs of making a product. Fixed costs are costs that do not change regardless of the level of output. That we know. So in knowing that there are fixed and variable costs, we can compute what's called absorbed costs. It's just a way of grouping, right, variable costs together. Call it absorption costing. We're separating out fixed and variable. That's all we're doing. That's what absorption costing is. In a very simple way. We're separating out fixed from variable costs. That's absorption costing. It's a method. And we can see that separation. And then of course we could report based off of that absorbed cost, absorbed or variable cost. That's all this tells us. So no need to go too deep in it, but it's good to understand, but not terribly important. At least not for this chapter. That is a more advanced level of accounting concept. Okay, we made it to the end of our discussion on cost, volume, profit analysis. Fancy term for break even. So now that you know how to break even, you'll know how to run the business appropriately by producing the sales above your costs. So, just as a reminder, what you need to do for this week, we have our LinkedIn Learning Certificate This one's on managerial accounting. That's what this course is all about. I want you to pay particular attention to this LinkedIn Learning Certificate and the series of videos therein. The reason why I find this particular LinkedIn Learning Certificate to be so important is because, and you'll see by the names of each chapter, that it basically covers some of the stuff we already learned and a lot of the stuff that we're going to be learning about. So if you are careful in going through this LinkedIn Learning Certificate, it'll help you to master the stuff that you've already learned and the stuff that you will be learning about. So that's why the position of this LinkedIn Learning Certificate is really important, right in the middle of the course. Because it's going to be really, really helpful for you, I promise. So take your time with the LinkedIn Learning Certificate. Make sure you watch every single video. Whole thing's going to take you probably about 2 hours or so. So use the class time on Thursday to do so. Yeah. This is how I knew about the sales mix already. Yeah. Yeah. 100% right. Yeah, that's in there. It's in there. So yeah, go through the LinkedIn Learning Certificate. It's a good one. I promise you'll like it. And then the Chapter 21 quiz. Any comments, questions, or concerns about anything that we covered tonight or anything at all about this course, this class?
Well, no, I did notice there was a midterm exam next week.
Yes, a midterm exam next week. You're right.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's going to cover a lot.
There's that, right? Yeah, the midterm exam. I'm glad you brought that up, Leland. So here's what we're going to do for next week. Because I don't want to burden you with the midterm exam just yet, because, you got the LinkedIn Learning Certificate to get through and that quiz. And if you just happen to be, I don't know, a little late with some stuff before that, gives you time to catch up. Next week, we got our midterm exam. It's going to cover chapters 18, 19, 20, and 21. So it basically covers, is it 17? I'm sorry, I don't even remember what we started with.
17.
17, thank you. So 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Okay? Covers everything we got to up until this point. The midterm exam is next week. It covers chapters 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. From what I remember, when I created the midterm exam, I think it's about 25 questions. So about 5 questions per chapter, roughly. What I'm going to do for you, because I'm still going to be here in town until November 5th, I am going to provide you with, next week on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, I'll provide you with a midterm exam review. What that means is I'm going to go through the questions with you. I'm going to show you where to find, where to look for in each chapter for each question. We'll talk about the tricky ones. So we'll maybe even do some examples. So I'll do that with you. We'll go through the midterm exam.
Sounds wonderful.
Yep. So the same time next Tuesday we'll do that. If for whatever reason you can't make class next Tuesday, I get it. So you're busy. You got things you got to take care of. You'll find that when you open up the midterm exam folder for next week, there's this one right here. It says midterm exam review. It's a video, recording from last semester. The exam did not change. It's the same exam. So if you watch this, because if you don't have time, whatever, next week, just watch this. Because I promise you, I'm going to do the same thing next Tuesday. And go through the exam, talk about where to find it, give you some pointers, all that good stuff, okay? I promise you'll do well. Yeah, I know you will. I know you will. But just so you know, that's there. Okay. Any other comments, questions, or concerns?
No, sir.
All right. Great. Well, as always, if you ever need any help, you have any questions, I can help you answer. You can email me, call me, or set up office hours. I'm around. So thank you all so much for your time today. I sincerely appreciate all of you, and I appreciate your hard work. I'm also happy to announce that you're all doing extremely well in this course. So keep up the great work. Remember, it's just like what I told you before. As long as you do the work, there's a good chance you'll probably pass. So keep doing that work, okay?
Thank you, Professor. See you next Tuesday.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Have a great night. Appreciate all of you. Bye-bye. Good night. Good night.
Good night, sir.